Welcome back to the Analog Renaissance. Today we're going to focus on the spaces between the objects we're drawing. In other words, the positive and negative relationship between each object. In the previous videos, we were working on contour drawings, and these drawings were focusing on moving across the surface of the object, whereas before, when we were drawing contour drawings, our focus was on the perimeter or the spaces along the surfaces. So we were highlighting each surface or plane or change in direction of the separation between two objects. So in this pepper, we see the perimeter of the pepper, and those perimeter lines were what we did as a modified contour, and then we did these contours that are following along the surface. So each of those lines that go across the surface are representing what we think that surface plane looks like as it travels through space. We found that while we were doing this, it was difficult to keep our eyes in place on some of these drawings. And we started to understand the relationship between the object and its surface. So we're starting to recognize the volume of what it is that we are drawing. In this space here, we were able to see some deep indentations, the rise and the fall of each of the endpoints of the pepper, giving us a more steep incline in some areas and a more gradual, shallow incline in others. So today we're going to focus on understanding some terminology, and we'll start with shape, a characteristic outline or space configuration of a figure or form. Figure and ground is seeing the parts of a visual field as a solid, well-defined object standing out against the less distinct background. And then finally, positive and negative shapes, where the positive is the object and the negative is the background. And we see that in this book, Drawing and Perceiving. They did a positive and negative study where they assembled a bunch of random objects and started to look at the positive, the object, against the background. I started this practice by using this cactus as the first subject. I thought it had some interesting relationship of positive and negative space. As I was working through this, I quickly realized this was not necessarily the best object for my attention on this exercise. I wound up being really constrained by the form of the cactus. You can see some overdrawing. You'll see me erase quite a bit. And I spent about 20-25 minutes on this whole piece and was struggling the entire time, trying to get my brain to understand the relationship of the object to the background or the background to the object, and continually working back and forth between the two. It became really quickly evident that this object in relationship to the space behind it was, one, hard for me to read, but two, also challenging me because I kept following the contour of the cactus itself instead of looking at the space around it. And there wasn't as much negative space between the two arms of the cactus as I would have thought. And so picking an object that has a lot of negative space in between the figure is probably most recommended at this point, because this was a challenge and it really didn't work out that well. My second attempt was a series of little tools and things across my table, and I started around the perimeter objects and was again tracing the object. So this was supposed to be an exercise in seeing positive and negative space, yet I was still focused on the object. This took me quite a bit of time, another, I would say 25 minutes to a half an hour, focusing on this. A lot of struggles. I hit the items, so things started to look out of proportion at one point, and my frustration just kept mounting as I was working on this. But I kept at it, and I learned some things about the struggle for this type of an assignment and how difficult it can be to take your mind from following the contour of the object to seeing the space between. So after completing these two first attempts, I needed to look for better explanation of what it was I was trying to do, because working on these two objects really wasn't coming together. I was struggling to understand. I knew conceptually I was supposed to be looking at the space between, but the tools I was using and the way in which I was approaching it just really wasn't getting me to that change in relationship of seeing the object versus seeing the space between. So I took some time away, I took a break and came back. So I've gone back to this book, which is Drawing and Perceiving by Douglas Cooper. And this example talks about the in-between spaces, which is what I was trying to draw here as well. I was trying to draw each space. I know I was looking at the objects. And what he suggests in his examples here is they were using a brush and ink, a large, like 1/4 inch brush. I guess that's not large, but it's bigger than a pencil tip for sure. This statement here, a couple sentences, to give space a more material quality, try techniques that activate it and avoid ones that are static. Don't begin drawing the outlines of spaces first. Instead, generate spaces outward from their centers and use a really active mark. Think of the action of your brush or pencil as analogous to the stick of a blind man probing a space. First, center it in the empty space, then move it around the space until it reaches the edges. And you can kind of see the way these are colored in, that they probably did that. Whereas I did the shading after, I feel as though they were doing the opposite. They were doing the space. They were filling the space in and then finding the perimeter. A thing of India ink. It's gonna make a mess for sure. Finding myself in the center and using a really active mark. Find the center of the empty space and move around until you reach its edge. Jeepers creepers. I feel like I should start in the center of the whole piece. Yeah, let's just do it. This is gonna be a disaster. All right. Have some confidence. From the center, active mark, pushing out. So we're drawing this space. Or painting. In my case, I'm painting the space. You might be able to do this with a Sharpie. I think there's something interesting right now about holding a paintbrush in my hand to do this. I do feel like I'm activating a different part of my visual. And I just outlined, so I'm going to try not to do that. From the center, out. So I know I didn't mean that to be so pointed. I lost track of my paintbrush edge. So that's one thing about pencil, you can erase. But with the ink, I can't really erase. So I just use some masking paper. So it's the corrective tape to fix that for myself. I think this angle on this brush is annoying. I don't think it. I know this angle on this brush is annoying. So I'm gonna go look for a flat brush. I'll be right back. This is interesting doing it this way. I'm like doing almost like these spokes from the center out to the extent of the edge. I mean, I don't know how someone, I feel like someone with every time I see someone who is blind using a walking cane, or they're like this. So I'm not quite using that analogy that they gave us. But going from the center to the edge, I am drawing the space. I'm not drawing the object anymore. And my eyes have, I feel like anyway, I could be full of it. I feel like my eyes have seen that edge or the space better. And now this comes around pretty quickly, but a little bit further down than I drew it. As you watch this, you can see I seem to be alternating from working from the center to working the perimeter of the object. And as I'm watching this back, I'm noticing that it's, as I get close to a piece that I've already found the opposing line or the opposite line, I then alternate between working from the center to working the perimeter. And it may not be the best methodology, but it is the methodology that I was using. Just thinking, you know, of course we don't have the actual still life that these examples were working from. So it's sort of interesting how accurate I'm assuming they are. So keep that in mind when you're looking at work of other people. Like right now, we don't actually know what that's, like we see that it's a chair and some spokes from a bicycle wheel, but I don't know how really well done it is. Neither do you. So we have to give each other some grace, and just know that this is practice, teaching our eyes to look a little bit differently and slowing down as we're challenged by these new techniques. And I think my scissors are way weird. But again, give myself some grace. And let's see how they come together. And they are open, so like, hello. They are gonna look funny, right? I'm not drawing the scissors, I'm drawing the spaces around the scissors. Just like the chair in these drawings and the bicycle aren't exactly perfect. Oh, that's interesting. This is like a way bigger than it I feel like it should be. But maybe because I didn't find the edge. Yeah, I think when you find the edge, it starts to look better. I think this comes out further. All right, I have to say when I started this, I was really not wanting to do this. So much. I really did not want to do this. And now that I've done it, I know it could be better. I get it. But the actual exercise, I mean, this is all sorts of messed up, but in general, I feel as though I was starting to see, yeah, the scissors look awful. I was starting to see the empty space, right? So don't draw the outlines of spaces first. Go from center out. And you can kind of tell I've done that in most places. Around the perimeter, it was that was more challenging, I think. Like I started here, right? Working my way here and then working my way there. And I know this is off. Like, let me see if I have a white pencil or something. I have a gray pencil. I think, well, one, this should be a sharper point coming in. And I also think that these scissors are, this is rounder, kind of like that, coming into there. Like, I think all of that should be white space. I think all of this should be white. I think that's more like it. It doesn't explain this angle being off and me being way too close. Like, all of this, I think, is actually more aligned down here. I think this is the right shape, just the wrong proportion. But in general, I feel like I learned a lot doing this. Didn't use as much ink as I thought I would. But in general, I feel like this was a really good exercise. I wouldn't shy away from this one. You could probably use any sort of paint you have. I use the India ink, and these are just like cheap brushes. So if you have like cheap, even kids brush, like the Crayola brush set, and you used ink or paint, I think the practice of looking at the space and not the object. I was really drawn to drawing the object when I was using a pencil. So I like the suggestion in the book by Douglas Cooper about using the ink and working from the center out. I think that was a much better explanation of how to see space. So overall, well, I know it's sort of terrible. I don't think it's as bad as the first one. This one, I was not drawing space. I know I was cheating. I was drawing the objects. So getting yourself to see space, I think the key is to, one, I had objects kind of configured in ways that made shape around them so that I could see each shape created separate and distinct. And for the most part, I'm not sure this was not a waste of time. This was a really good use of time. And it took me a really long time. I've been doing this for about 50 minutes or so. But don't avoid this one. If you have any sort of paint and any sort of paintbrush, it's worth opportunity to see things a little differently. And notice how I arranged things so that they overlapped and I could see space between them. And they're not recognizable objects anymore. I'm looking at the space between.